Thank you, Simon. Some of you, unfortunately, have already met me when you got sort of bullied into sitting down here earlier on today. So what we're going to talk about for the next couple of hours or so, that's right, isn't it? CPD, right? 7 hours a minute? No. Is essentially, I want to talk about resilience. But for me, resilience has become a little bit of a selfish subject, right? Am I resilient? Are you resilient? Can I go on a resilience course? I wish I could go on a resilience course. That'd be literally awesome. 2 hours, half a day, tick a box, I'm resilient, go home, everything's perfect. It just doesn't work like that. And here's my first statement of the day. I've got some really bad news for you. Does anybody think spreadsheets are interesting? Yeah, they're not. So the biggest problem we've got, genuinely, is that processes don't work with people, right? Processes are fantastic if we're trying to prep a vehicle to go on the road. They don't work with people. I will prove it to you right now. I like to drink my coffee black. Does anybody else drink black coffee? Yep, you've passed. Congratulations. I'm sorry I was rude about you having no friends. Congratulations. So essentially what happens is this morning I get up, I come here, it's 7:30 in the morning, so dangerous o'clock, and I go to Starbucks. Other coffee shops are available, just not here. And I go to Starbucks and I go up to the counter and I say, "Good morning, can I have a regular black coffee, please?" And usually then they ask me my name, which frankly at 7:30 in the morning when I clearly haven't yet had a coffee is a brave thing to do because I want a coffee, not a friend at this stage. All my black coffee drinkers, what is the next thing that they ask me, do you think? This man's on it, look, he's on the pace. Do you want milk in it? Ah, it's not black, is it? Right, and that is because somebody has given them a customer handling process. And the customer handling process says, step 1, ask customer's name. Step 2, ignore whatever the customer told you. Step 3, try and sell the customer some sort of sticky bum thing that went out of date a month ago that nobody ever wanted in the first place. Processes don't work with people because we are too variable. If we're trying to build kind of a safety culture where we put our hands up, a growth mindset, we cannot work with processes, we have to build a toolkit. Now then, I hear you saying, Tim, I get it. What qualifies you to talk about all of this sort of stuff? Well, I am what used to be referred to as a Covert Human Intelligence Officer. So my job was to recruit and run foreign assets all around the world. It's all about people. Okay, before, I think I showed you this process. Before I go any further, I've got some terrible, terrible news for all of you. I'm so sorry, I'm going to ruin a few of you's childhoods. James Bond was the second worst spy in the world. The worst spy in the world was Jason Bourne, and that's because he couldn't remember his own name. The second worst spy in the world, I'm so sorry, and it literally pains me to say this to you, right, was James Bond. You see, every single time he steps outside of his front door, somebody shoots at him. So he's kind of missed the point, to be completely honest with you. And I've run members of Al-Qaeda as agents, and I've run members of the Libyan government as agents. And you know that moment in all the James Bond films where the guy with a white cat and all of that kind of goes, "Ah, Mr. Bond." If at any stage the head of Al-Qaeda had turned around to me and gone, "Ah, Mr. Tim," right, I am having a really bad day. And frankly, at that point, it is probably unrecoverable. So if it's not about sliding Aston Martins and shooting things, kind of what is it all about? It's about people, and actually it's about ultimately trusting relationships, which brings us back to culture. But before I go any further, does anybody watch Line of Duty? Did anybody see Line of Duty? Excellent. Were you H, sir? You couldn't tell me. Careful. Okay. I'll let you stay or let you live rather, just for a minute in case you were H. Nobody had ever heard the expression chiz before, ever. Covert Human Intelligence Source, chiz. I suspect the reason nobody ever heard of that before is because the first word is covert. There's a clue there, really, until the BBC decided this will sell loads of ratings. If at any stage today, more importantly later on tonight when you've got home and you've had a little cheeky cider or a glass of Malbec and you think, that espionage stuff was quite interesting, I'm going to Google it. Remember, chiz stands for Covert Human Intelligence Source. And it is spelt CHIS. Because when you get home later, tired after the drive, have a little drink, and you Google Chiz, and you spell it wrong, you're going to get some very, very weird websites, okay? And I'm not entirely sure that's my fault. So you've been warned, okay? So we're going to talk about enabling resilience in other people. You see, the thing is, being resilient all on your own isn't that useful. So what we actually need to do is we need to try and work out, how do we create a situation where the people around us can become more resilient? That's what we're trying to achieve, particularly for any form of leadership role, high pressure role, crisis role. Let me sort of share with you a story. I thought, right, this is it. I'm going to sign up and I am going to become an intelligence officer. Sign here. I thought, this is excellent. They're going to take me down to Savile Row. They're going to fit me up with some sort of beautiful three-piece suit. They're going to allocate me an Aston Martin, and presumably the Aston Martin and my tie are going to match, and this is all going to be marvellous. So, as we're in Birmingham, imagine my horror when I find myself sitting on the side of the Brecon Beacons, Pen y Fan to be precise. Anybody been up Pen y Fan? Anyone been in the Brecon Beacons? So you all know it's like Scotland, just more miserable. And we're going over Pen y Fan for the 4th time in a day, and I'm carrying a rucksack that weighs 55 pounds, and we have to average 6 kilometres an hour. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't ever remember seeing James Bond have to do this. This is rubbish. And I came to the only natural conclusion that you can come to, and that is that quitting is the right thing to do. I just need to stop this and give up. This is miserable. I've had a go. I'm done. So eventually I keep going along, and we get to the next checkpoint, which is on top of the mountain, and there's one of these little orange tents. Anybody old enough to remember Van Gogh? Ironically, I've been sponsored by Van Gogh for the last 10 years, which, given this talk, is quite funny. And I was at a gig the other week with the managing director, Robert Birrell of Van Gogh, and I said to him, thanks, Rob, Van Gogh, turning the outdoors into PTSD for 20 years. Anyway, so I go up to this little orange tent, and and I'm like, that's it, I am done. This is the moment, by the way, where if I was Foxy or Ant Middleton standing here, I would say to you, the inner lion roars. The titanium warrior that you didn't know was inside you fights its way out. Bollocks. What happens is it gets colder, wetter, more miserable, and you confirm to yourself that quitting is the correct answer. So what I do is I get up to this tent in the middle of the nowhere, and I go up to the instructor, and the instructor's sitting there, steely-eyed, 2 o'clock in the morning, wet, cold. He's got a cup of tea and a piece of cake. And I contemplated killing him for a cup of tea and a piece of cake. But then I thought to myself, he hasn't been on his feet for 10 hours. He also has been in the Special Forces for 10 years, so I'm probably not even going to get a piece of cake and a cup of tea. So I go up to the instructor and I said, staff, that is me, done, out. It's a bit like Alan Sugar. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Nobody means that either. And I said, staff, I'm out, I'm done, I'm finished. And he looks at me and he says, Blue 5. It's a humane process for the HR directors amongst you. He says, Blue 5, you're not very clever, are you? And I went, this is brilliant. Not only am I not fit enough, not strong enough, and not tough enough, but it turns out that I'm stupid as well, just when I thought the day couldn't get any better. And he looks at me and he says, Blue 5, where are you? I'm like, I'm at checkpoint 6, staff. Yes, Blue 5, but where are you? I said, well, I'm on top of the hill. I'm on top of Pen y Fan, staff. Correct, Blue 5, you are on top of the hill. And he said, where do you think the next checkpoint is? If I'm on top of Pen y Fan team, you don't need to be an expert on the Brecon Beacons. Where do you think the next checkpoint might be in relation to the checkpoint on top of the mountain? Where do we think? At the bottom of the mountain. See, you two should do selection, right? At the bottom of the mountain, right? So the instructor says to me, where do you think the next checkpoint is? Blue 5. And I said, staff, it's probably at the bottom. And he said, yes, Blue 5, it's at the bottom. So if you want, you can quit and walk down to the next checkpoint. Or you can not quit and walk down to the next checkpoint. But I got to tell you, you are walking down to the next checkpoint. And I said, staff, you make a really valid point. If it's all right with you, what I'm going to do is probably walk down to the next checkpoint and we'll go from there. And he said, good idea, Blue 5. So off I toddle on my merry way. And something weird happens. You get within kind of, I don't know, 100 yards, 50 yards, whatever, of the next checkpoint. The old shoulders go back a little bit. And you think to yourself, well, maybe I can do this. I spent the next 25, 26 hours going one checkpoint at a time. But the point out of all of this is not about me. It's about the guy that enabled me. Because you see, when you watch all of this kind of crazy stuff on the telly, believe it or not, very few people fail. Most people quit. And in fact, by all of the kind of rules of the game, that instructor that day should have just said to me, thank you very much, sign here, you're out, done, finished, it's all over, sort yourself out. But for some reason, and I've never met him before or since, and in fact, sometimes I do this sort of thing to an audience of a couple of thousand people, and I'm kind of hoping one day I'll be at the back of the room and somebody goes, Tim, that was me. But for some reason, he chose that day to enable that resilience in me. With a touch of military humour and a little bit of a pat on the back, he encouraged me to go on. So actually, anything I've done kind of since, it sounds ridiculous, but it's actually down to that one individual just going, don't quit yet, soldier. And that's the piece that we're missing at the moment. We live in a strange world, and a lot of people at the moment, particularly within our workforces and our teams and our organisations, want to know what's in it for me. What do I get out of it? Where's my thing? If we can start to work together more, i.e. enable resilience in other people, it's much more impressive what we can start to achieve. So we need to focus on that, on enabling each other to be at our best ability rather than focusing in on self. And that instructor did that to me that day. The next thing is, we've got to help people change their perception. Who here before has been in a situation where you feel like the world is ending? One of your drivers has shunted the vehicle, something terrible has happened, whatever's going on, and you cannot see past that moment, right? And your world narrows in, doesn't it, around you, and you can't see left and right. And I'm going to explain that to you shortly. But what then happens is you become narrow-focused, and it's very difficult. We call it analysis paralysis or perception. So a lot of the time, when we're dealing with high-pressure situations, or when we're trying to get our team operating at the highest possible level, what we actually need to do is change their perception before we change their reality. We may not be able to change the actual situation we found ourselves in. There's quite a lot of stuff going on in the world at the moment that we don't have a lot of control over. I'm going to be polite in case we've got any Americans in the room. But actually, what we need to do is shift the perception of the people around us. I'll show you what I mean. I was on the way to work one day, and I was in Kabul in Afghanistan. And Kabul is, frankly, is an awful lot like Birmingham. It's just hotter, more guns, and less drugs. So, and we're driving along through the middle of Birmingham, and bullets started to bounce off the outside of the car, which frankly represents a pretty terrible day at work. And as the team leader at this point, of course, my brain is racing. My pulse is off the chart, my palms are sweaty, my full team is with me, this is it. And all I can think to myself is, book deal, Netflix, who's going to play me? Tom Cruise is too short, Brad Pitt's not good looking enough. Laura, that's not a joke. All joking aside, my adrenaline level, my perception of this moment is completely off the chart. So what we do when these things happen is we take a tactical pause. We just take one deep breath and we talk about intelligence, not information. And I say to myself, what's actually happening here? What's really happening here? And then I think to myself, well, hang on. The 4 people that put this little job together are sitting in this car. We're talking to control on the radio. So really, and we kind of dress like locals-ish. So actually, i.e. not in a 3-piece suit. So essentially, the chances that anybody knows we're here, knows what's going on, are almost so remote that they can be discarded. So then you start to look left and right, and you think to yourself, well, what is actually going on then? And the reality of what was going on was that two rival suppliers, if you like, in fact, pharmaceutical suppliers, local to Afghanistan, that used to sell a really high value product that was often shipped in quite large quantities to London, Birmingham, etc., were having a retail dispute as to who could sell what, where, and when, and to whom. And negotiations had broken down. And in fact, negotiations had broken down so far that they were negotiating via Kalashnikov. The problem was they couldn't shoot for toffee. So in actual fact, they weren't shooting at us, they were shooting at each other and missing, which I thought was rude, to be honest. And every part of me, as now the owner of a training company, wanted to go, be better. Come on, I'll show you. But this was neither the time nor the place. Once we realised that wasn't for us, we did what anybody brave undercover soldier would do at that point and drove away quietly into the distance and did nothing. Because otherwise we'd have had our own personal Black Hawk Down moment, and they don't end well. My point to you is this: how easy would it have been to respond to our perception of that moment? Because all of my emotions were confirming what I thought was going on. There was bullets flying, my pulse rate was off the chart, there were other people there. All of my kind of sensory perceptions are leading me astray. What we did was worked out what was really, really going on, and therefore we did nothing because it didn't involve us. Now, I hear what you're saying, right? You say, oh, Tim, I get it, Afghanistan, bullets, fine, sure, that sort of thing, that change of perception, that doesn't happen here, that doesn't happen to us. But it does. Who has ever had that phone call or that email? You know, the one from your boss that says, 20 minutes, my office. Or better yet, it's come from the boss's PA, because the boss is so angry they can't actually talk to themselves. And they say, my office, 20 minutes, right? And you instantly think to yourself, don't you, this is good news. I've been promoted, probably some sort of pay rise or a bonus. No, of course you don't. You swallow your SIM card, you delete your internet history, and you start rooting around in the bottom of whatever kit you can find to find a second pair of company car keys because you think we're done. But unbeknownst to you, the boss is just super busy, and they haven't thought about it for a minute, and they just want to talk to you about the latest figures or the news or the work or whatever it might be. And they've done what we call careless communication. They've just not thought about the outcomes or the consequences of what they're communicating. So ironically, they've triggered a fight or flight mechanism, something we'll talk about in a minute. They've triggered a fight or flight mechanism in you through careless communication. So much confrontation we create within our workforces is triggered through careless communication, because we're not thinking about an outcome or the circumstances that that person's finding themselves sitting in. Or better yet, what behavioural change we want somebody to do off the back of it. Does that make sense, guys? And sometimes just taking a pause, thinking about how we're going to deliver it and what we're going to say, and the behavioural change we want to see off the back of it will totally transform the way we try and communicate with somebody. Particularly if you've got people out on the road, working isolated, working at different locations, remote working, all of these good things that we do now that actually challenge the way we communicate, and that is being missed. Now then, I am somebody, as you'll find out when we get to the end of sort of this session, as a rule, I make pretty poor holiday choices. Don't ever come on holiday with me, is sort of my first starting point. Does anybody not like heights? Anybody not like heights? Camera's on my helmet. That's the top of Crib Gawk. The nav is easy, there is no more up. Well, I'll let you have the adult version now. Andy here, the guide, turns around to me, says, Tim, what's your footing? I'm glad you were here. Genius. We've all had that piece of advice. That's the Matterhorn even in Zermatt in Switzerland. We're about 4,600-700 meters or something at that point there. The good news is there's nothing to hit on the way down. But tomorrow we're going to talk about med training and first aid training, and all of my medical colleagues tell me that the fall is not the problem, It's the sudden stop at the bottom. Now then, what do we think as I walk along there? What's going on physiologically, do you think? What's going on within my sort of body, if you like, as we walk across the summit of the Matterhorn there? What do we think? What's going on? Somebody tell me. Cortisol, good. What else? Adrenaline, good. What's your heart rate? Right, so actually what happens is the body is a pretty clever thing, kind of. So it triggers a fight or flight mechanism. So the first thing that happens is we get a shot of adrenaline, right? You go, poof. And what that does is that picks your heart rate up. And that's what makes you feel anxious. Anyone got that? You feel that kind of twingy? That's what makes you feel anxious, right, when you're going along. And what it's doing, a bit like an engine in an older car, it's warming up the muscles, getting it ready to go. It also narrows your vision down. So you focus on what's going on in front of you. Weirdly, your kind of peripheral hearing goes, and your hair stops growing. You, sir, have obviously had a fairly stressful time, I'm just suggesting. And at this stage, what also happens is you get a shot of cortisol, as this gentleman rightly says. Anyone want to, what's a cortisol do? Anyone want to hazard a guess? It's a painkiller, right? So the body's pretty clever, because the body says, hang on a minute, Big Simon's over here, look, right? He's my target. This is my flight or flight mechanism. I'm feeling targeted by Simon. So I'm like, here we go. So I'm going to focus on the target. Heart rate comes up, muscles warm, everything else goes out of the way like that. And what it does, it drives me in on Simon. And what happens, I get a shot of cortisol as a painkiller, just in case Simon gets a lucky shot in. And it would be lucky, Simon. So the body's pretty clever, right? As we're kind of going forward and as this is going on. Problem is, how useful do you think any of that is when we're trying to ride along or walk along that ridgeline on there? Is that helping us or hindering us, do you think? It's hindering us, isn't it? Because it's kind of shut me down, right? If you think about it, it's even less useful in a work environment. If you are working in a genuinely high pressure, health and safety management type scenario, unless you are actually fighting Simon, literally, then actually that fight or flight mechanism is making you perform less well. But it is a chemical reaction. There is nothing you can do about it. It's a hormonal reaction. If it's triggered within your team, you have to deal with the human reaction before you try and solve the problem. If you want to increase high performance in the people, enable resilience in them. How do we do it? Aha, the $1 million question. So if we look at that video there, what am I actually doing when I go across that ridgeline? What am I actually doing in reality? Strip away the mountains and the snow and what am I actually doing? Walking, yeah. I'm really good at it, look. I can do it backwards, sideways. I'm literally all over it. Slightly less cocky up there, to be completely honest with you, right? That's all I'm doing. So the way we lift ourselves out of this situation to make better decisions in a high-pressure crisis situation, or the way we help our teams do it, is we focus on what we can do. So in this situation here, I'm just walking. Now there's a moment that I can't help you with. And given my background, it might surprise you to know that one of my least favorite sayings in the world is man up, right? That's really useful, right? That's like telling, oh, you want to win the football game on Saturday, you need to score more goals. Brilliant. Thanks very much. Yep. It's nearly as useful as telling someone to calm down. Who's been told to calm down at some point? Yes? And did you go to yourself, oh, I'll be back in a minute. Where are you going? I'm just going to go and calm down. I don't know why I didn't think of that. I'll be back in a second. Yeah? Telling someone to man up has a similar effect, if that's easier for you to understand. What you have to do is you have to invite somebody to be courageous. You see, the difference is, if I invite you to be courageous, it is your choice and your decision. And when you invite somebody to be courageous, you would be amazed how many times people step up. The men and women I used to work with overseas, the real job was for me to invite them to be courageous to provide the intelligence. Not one of them ever walked away. They always chose to be courageous. What you do is you analyze the risks. You concentrate on what you can do. So you look at things like training, safety equipment, where it all comes from. You look at the area that you can't control and you highlight it and you're open and honest about the area that you can't control, and you ask people to step up and take on that challenge with you. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more tomorrow when we talk about some scenario-based first aid training stuff. But 18 months ago, myself and my colleague Mike, who's here somewhere, we decided to go to Ukraine. We were 4 hours east of Kyiv, and we were delivering trauma training in the Ukraine. It was a little bit sketchy out there at the time. So when we went out, I said to the guys, okay, I can control this, this, and this, but drones, I can't do anything about. We have no control other than we can come up with some good ideas to keep us safe as best we can. It is your decision. I can't mitigate that risk. How many of them do you think chose not to come? None of them. So they were invited to be courageous and they stepped up. And that's one of the things we absolutely have to take away as a communicator and as a leader. If I tell you to man up, I am in some way, shape or form implying you are not up to it. If I lay out the risks and then invite you, hey, can you take on this challenge with me? It is your decision. And believe it or not, people are much more likely to step up. Does that make sense, guys? We have this expression, if you want to remember this, fear, false expectation appearing real. It's something that happens a lot in any form of crisis situation. The coulda, woulda, shoulda, yeah? This might happen, then that'll happen, then this'll happen. None of those things have happened yet. This gentleman down here mentioned cortisol. One of the problems of long-term cortisol exposure is it creates catastrophic thinking. How long do you think cortisol is supposed to stay in the body? Seconds, minutes, or hours? Seconds, yeah. It's all part of that fight or flight, right? Is what's going on. And then what happens is if we're there for too long, we get catastrophic thinking. So as I'm walking along the ridge line, my brain is going, if you trip, you'll fall, and you'll take him with you, then this will happen, then that will happen, it'll all be terrible, and your wife will inherit the house, and the cars, and the horses, and the aircraft, and the yacht, some joke, and all of these things. None of these things have happened yet. Who can put their hand on heart and say they've done that? They've suddenly found a catastrophic situation, and they've focused on stuff that hasn't happened yet, and may never happen. That's not to say you shouldn't look at it later on, but it's not going to help you deal with that initial crisis. Just out of interest, walking along the ridge there, that was Andy, a friend of mine in front of me. If Andy had fallen, he hasn't, by the way, he's still with us, it's all okay. If Andy had fallen, anyone want to hazard a guess what I've got to do? Any mountaineers amongst you? I've got to jump the other way, yeah. So if Andy falls to the left, I've got to dive off to the right, and then we both wish we'd taken up golf, because that's not a sport, it's a pastime, right? And you probably noticed that Andy was carrying sort of 3 or 4 coils of orange rope, and for the mountaineers amongst you will realise that's more than you would normally carry. And that was something I instigated, because that gives me about 3 seconds to decide how much I like Andy. What we are trying to do is create a culture where people are striving to succeed rather than being afraid of failing. If we try and force a culture on somebody and we create a situation where people are afraid to fail, what happens, do you think? What happens? What do people do? Cover stuff up, hide stuff, play it safe, don't push any boundaries, we don't progress. Today is not a geopolitical talk, but right now, as us, right, playing it safe is not going to work, is it? We need to do something different, we need to think outside the box, we need to adapt. If you want your people to adapt a new culture, to move forward, to do something different, you've got to allow them to make mistakes because they're going to. Otherwise, they're going to withdraw and you won't achieve anything. And if we get to a situation where you cover up mistakes, in my old game, that would be fatal. It could also be fatal in your industry too. Think about road traffic collisions, etc. So we've got to create a situation where people are striving to succeed rather than afraid to fail. Because we're in Birmingham, I'm aware that people sort of like, people kind of like football. I'm sorry. It's the thing's the wrong shape and there's not enough people on the pitch, but we'll deal with that later. However, a few years ago, I got a phone call from the England women's football team. And they said, Tim, we'd like to come and do a day with the team, which is interesting, because within that statement, there are at least 2 subjects of which I know nothing about, one of which is football. And I said, so what's the crack then? And they sent me a load of video footage. It's not the current team before he gets too excited. And somebody sent me a load of footage of that. And I've never played a game of football in my life, right? So if I get the terminology wrong, then forgive me. But the striker missing, right? So she was not putting the ball in the net. And I got an hour and a half's worth of footage of the striker not putting the ball in the net. So I thought, well, I've got, crikey, this is the easiest performance coaching job I've literally ever done. This is frankly brilliant. So I got there, I got to Loughborough University where they were at the time, and I'm on stage, and a whole team is there in front of me, and the poor lady, the striker, she's sitting right there. And I said, this is easy, I've got the answer for you. Saka. And they all went, what? What do you mean? I said, well, Saka, she's clearly rubbish. And they went, what? I said, well, I know nothing about football at all, but my understanding is we have to put the round inflatable thing in the back of the netty thing over there, and we do that more times than them, and then we kind of win. And she's clearly rubbish at it. And they went, well, what makes you draw that conclusion? I said, you sent me an hour and a half worth of video footage of her missing. That's what makes you draw that conclusion. And they went, no, she's brilliant. Normally she's brilliant. I said, what do you mean normally she's brilliant? Well, other games, she's brilliant. No, I don't know. Warm-up games, club games, pool games, she's brilliant. It's just the big ones we have a problem. I said, oh, right. What changes do you think? What changes between pressure? Pressure changes, right? So the pressure was debilitating her, which is normal, by the way. So in this high-pressure situation, where we accept that our team is performing to the very best of its ability because they spend hours and hours training, if it's the pressure that's causing her to miss the goal, do we need to increase or decrease the pressure to increase her performance? Decrease the pressure. So why so often in a commercial environment, when our crews are making mistakes, when people are not picking up on errors because they're under pressure, do we increase the pressure and expect it to get better? It's not to say we don't want high performance, we do. We've just got to go about it differently. So I said to them, right, here's what you're going to do. We're going to watch this video footage again. And this poor lady was like, really? I was like, one more time. Only this time, when we watch it, what I want you to do, I want you to watch the coach, the other players, and the crowd. So I'm not interested in the lady kicking the ball. I want to watch the rest of it. Or want you to watch the rest of it. What do you think they were all doing? What do you think? Yeah, right. It's all right. They're, So they are, and particularly the crowd was very comfortable letting her know that she'd missed, right? Is that increasing or decreasing the pressure? It's increasing the pressure. So guess what happens? Now, when she goes to strike the ball, not only has she missed the last one, she now feels like she's letting everybody else around her down. We increase the pressure and she misses. So what we taught them to do was to relieve the pressure. So he said to them, like, you may be angry inside, it might be really annoying, but she is the best chance you've got. She's your highest performing goal kicker, so therefore you need to tell her it's all right. You need to take the pressure away a minute and allow her the room to perform, which is what we did. And it was quite funny. I spoke to them sort of fairly recently, and they said to me, they've got this weird situation now where the minute she's on the pitch, they essentially tell her to shoot at goal from anywhere on the pitch, whether there was a chance of a goal or not. She then essentially misses because she was stood next to her own goal. Someone pats her on the back, says, that was awesome. She calms down and doesn't miss again. So essentially, they tried to get her to miss a goal within the first 2 minutes and then crack on. What's also quite interesting, I don't know if anybody watched any of the Six Nations rugby this year at all, but other than, I live in Scotland, other than Finn Russell, who will never be forgiven and will be cast out forevermore for missing free kicks against England, but apart from Finn Russell, every time one of the goal kickers misses a kick, now you see the captain or one of the senior players go out, pat them. The old rugby players like to pat each other on the backside, don't they? We're not going to get into that right now. But you see them go up, tap each other, pat each other. The rest of the team go, hey, buddy, that's okay. And that's because I'm not claiming credit for that, but somebody within that team has worked out that they are the one under the most pressure, and actually you need them relaxed, focused, and operating to get their best high performance out. So if you are working in high pressure environments, and I would suggest that if you're listening to the driver safety theatre and you're buying high-vis equipment with harnesses, helmets, and breathing apparatus, there's a clue there somewhere that you might be operating in a high-pressure environment, I would suggest. Then maybe what we need to do is to create this operating space to get the best performance out of our teams. I spent more time in Afghanistan than we did in lockdown, to give you a frame of reference. And my team were exactly like you are now imagining. And I spent most of my time looking after them because I didn't need to question them professionally. That was way gone. My time was spent making sure they were the best selves, making sure that everything was okay at home, that they got what they needed, that it was all okay. Because from a skill set perspective, I knew that was weighed off. I knew that was done. I like to say this. If any of you, hand on heart moment, I won't ask you to put your hands up. But if you have to explain to any member of your team that your door is always open, it isn't. Because you had to explain it. It's just something to ponder on and think for a moment. And as a few of us are going to dinner tonight, I shouldn't say it because it's a bit cheeky, and I've got Mark and Simon sitting there, but I absolutely guarantee that when we go to dinner tonight, somebody from the audience today will come up to me at dinner, and they will come up to me at the bar, which is brave because I've never bought a drink in my life. They'll come up to me at the bar and they'll go, Tim, you and I should talk because I'm an alpha male as well. And you'll go, are you aware you had to tell me that? I said to you before, I make poor holiday choices. So I'm gonna end with one final tale of woe, but also resilience and where that comes from. Michael, would you mind just go and telling those guys that I used to kill people for a living? So anyone ever heard of the Dakar Rally? So, right, so 14 months ago, I decided to go and do the Dakar Rally unsupported on a motorbike, racing Male Moto, and on a motorbike. Sorry? Husqvarna factory rally bike. So anyway, so I decided to go and do that, and my wife said to me at the time, there's just two small problems with this, Tim. You've never raced off-road and you don't own a motorbike. I said to you, she thinks spreadsheets are interesting. So anyway, off I go, and for those of you that don't know, it's a massive 6,000 kilometre orienteering race across the desert where you're trying to ride a motorbike off-road, speeds over 100 miles an hour, whilst also navigating and trying really hard kind of not to die, essentially. So anyway, the qualifying race went really well. I finished around the World Rally Race Championship, which I was quite proud of. And then we got out onto the Dakar, and the first day went pretty well. And we got into the second day, and I spectacularly ran out of talent. So I don't really remember what happened, but I'm going to tell you the story. I was doing about, and I know this from the data on the bike, I was doing about 145, 150 kilometers an hour. The only conclusion I can come to is that I glanced down to navigate, because the next thing I remember is being unconscious in the desert. And I came round. Has anybody ever kind of fallen off like a mountain bike or whatever, and it's kind of stuck on top of you? You can't, I can't move. And I couldn't move. And I thought, well, okay, the bike is obviously sort of still on top of me, and my helmet was all crushed on the side of my head. And I looked up, and the bike was over there. I thought, okay, this is essentially bad. So I propped myself up on my left arm, and I was paralysed from here down, so I couldn't move my legs at all. And as I propped myself up with my helmet smashed on my face, my right arm flopped to one side. And tomorrow we're going to talk about traumatic first aid training and stuff. And I thought to myself, well, I know what that is. That's a traumatic injury. So I then searched myself for blood. The sand sucks out the blood, sorry, but that's like the way life is. So I searched around for blood, couldn't find it. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. So what I did is I undid my jacket, and I tucked my right arm in my jacket and did it up so that it was kind of no longer a problem. It's all relative, right? And then it took me 25 minutes to crawl 10 meters back to the bike. On the bike is an emergency recall medical system. Anyone do any sailing or boating or like that? Same sort of thing. Push a button, calls a helicopter. My whole world at that moment was that button. And what happens is you have to be a part of your own solution. No one at this point was coming to get me. You have to be a part of your own solution, and that is a choice. So I focused. I got myself back to the bike. It took about 25 minutes to get 10 meters. I pushed it sounded like that. I pushed the button on the bike. I passed out. I came round again thinking, did I push the button on the bike or not? I looked at it. It was beeping like that. The little thing was going off. I thought, well, that's okay. But I was then aware that I've passed out again. So I thought, well, this is bad. So I sort of took the inserts out of my helmet, Any sort of safety kit manufacturers amongst you? Best thing in the world ever. The inserts that pull from the inside of a helmet out, so I could take the inserts out, pop the helmet off without doing any more damage. Because essentially, had I passed out again and vomited inside my own helmet, it's really bad. Sorry about that if you haven't had dinner yet. So I got my helmet off, propped myself up against the bike, waited for the helicopter to arrive. Helicopter came, paramedics scooped me up, put me on a board. It's quite funny actually, when we talk about careless communication, I'm lying on the board in the back of the helicopter, and I look up, and the defibrillator, because lots of people around here sell defibrillators, right? I look up, and the defibrillator lights up and comes to life, and I'm like, oh no. Just when I thought today couldn't get any worse, they're about to jumpstart me. And I'm like literally sort of strapped to this spinal board like this, and I'm going, oh, statistique, O2, O2, in my best French. At which point, the paramedic starts to laugh at me. There's a theme here somewhere. And it turns out they were just charging it up. So apparently with the trauma pack, when you plug it back into the helicopter, it automatically charges up. So when they plugged it back in, it had just kind of fired up. And I was like, you could have told me that. Anyway, 20-minute helicopter ride, land, doctor goes, this is bad. Again, I'm glad you were here. Puts me on an ambulance. They send me 4 hours across the desert to Zagora in Morocco. And somebody in a Liverpool football strip. I've got nothing against Liverpool Football Club, but I was kind of expecting to see somebody in medical scrubs. X-rayed me, came back out and said, there's nothing wrong with you. And I went, I don't feel like there's nothing wrong with me. Okay, 4-hour ride back. By this point, the thing with the Dakar is it moves every day. So I knew that in 3 hours' time, the whole rally was going to move. So I slept on my own on the desert floor, got up in the morning, weirdest thing in the world ever, got an Uber. That's pretty weird, right? Got a 7-hour taxi ride up and down the Atlas Mountains, got back into Morocco, Marrakesh airport. I'd said to the paramedic, by the way, can't do this in the UK, when the pain wears off, I'm going to be in like real trouble. So can you give me some of whatever you're giving me, for when it wears off? And he's like, yeah, for sure. Gives me some drugs, right? Anyway, I go through Marrakesh airport, land in Amsterdam, go through Amsterdam airport, land in Paris, go through Paris airport, get back to Edinburgh with a pocket full of Class A drugs, without so much as a murmur. So I'm just saying there might be a business in it. I eventually get back to Edinburgh. I get back to my house. My wife meets me. She wasn't overly ecstatic. I was wearing the same clothes that I'd been riding the bike in, but all of the really expensive kit that they cut off me, which made me sad for any of the bikers amongst you. And then my chief instructor, who you'll meet tomorrow if you come and watch our demo, Mike, there, looked at me and said, Tim, this is really bad. I said, thanks. So we went to A&E, where I sat for 11 hours. And then after 11 hours, they came up to me, and the guy said, do not move. You stay right there. You do not move. And he put a Miami J neck brace on me, which is one that starts here and comes right down the back. He said, and I'd fractured my neck in 3 places. I'd broken my C4, 5, and 6, and I had a 12-centimeter edema swelling down my spinal cord, and my spinal cord is still touching right now. So in fact, if I'm trembling or got weird hands, it's because just over a year later, I still got pens and needles and weird stuff in my hands. So it's not because I had a drink, that's later. But essentially, that's what's going on. I had to wear the neck brace for 3.5 months. Here's the thing that's really interesting about communication. My naive soldier brain, when the minute they take the neck brace off of me, it's all going to be okay. And I'll be back to running marathons, cycling, racing, what can possibly go wrong? They took the neck brace off me and it got worse. My hand symptoms got worse. I could barely move my knees. And the doctor had said to me, the surgeon had said to me, Tim, he said, look, if anything gets worse, phone me. Problem was, I now have this fear, right? Because I think if I phone him, they were talking about putting a cage in my neck or putting me back on a neck brace. I'm like, none of me wants that. But also, I'm now terrified that something bad is happening. So I spent probably a week and a half, 2 weeks kind of in purgatory. Eventually, I phoned somebody up, not the doctor, and I said, this is what my mum actually is a physiotherapist. And I said, what's going on with this? And mum went, oh, it's completely normal. I was like, oh, brilliant. She said, basically, you've got a big head, and your head has been sat on top of a neck brace for 4 months. So your whole spine, neck, and everything else hasn't been supporting the weight of it. So when you get rid of the neck brace, the weight goes back on, it compresses the spine, and that's what you're feeling. I was like, all of that stress and anxiety, with all the stuff I've done, it's a story for another day. I was in an earthquake on the side of Mount Everest. I've been shot at more times than I can think about. The most helpless I've ever felt was thinking I was losing the feeling in my legs and arms, and all somebody had to do was tell me. Communication, communication, communication. And there are sort of 2 key lessons that come out of that whole episode, really, right? And the first one is this. The surgeon said to me one day, he said, Tim, let me give you a frame of reference. He said, you were a thousandth of a millimetre from not being here. That day, I bought a brand new helmet to go racing. That helmet had never been worn before I went to scrutineering, pre-race checks, to go and get that done. The surgeon said to me, if I had worn the old helmet, I would be dead. A thousandth of a millimetre in it. So if anybody ever needs an advocate for effective safety equipment in what you're doing on a daily basis, I'll send you the pictures, or even the helmet for that matter. The next thing was, he said to me, there is no kind of medical evidence around this. He said, but I've got 3 or 4 cases now. One was a former rugby player who dived into a swimming pool. Everyone ever see that? And he said that both of you basically chose to move. He said, so you've got spinal cord damage. He said, but actually, in that moment, you essentially forced communication up and down your spine, and we think, we've got enough cases of this, that is what's made the difference between recovering and not. So choosing to be a part of the solution, choosing to make something happen, is potentially what's made the difference. And that lesson has really, really, really stuck with me, guys, right? So if I was going to take something out of any of this today, our mission is not to enable resilience in ourselves, it's to enable resilience in the people around us. We need to help them do that by changing their perception. We need to help them focus on what they can do and where they can go. What skills have we given them? What kit and equipment have we given them to make it safer? We then invite them to be courageous and step up. We want them to be striving to succeed, not afraid to fail. And if we're in a genuine high-pressure situation, as leaders, and I don't mean your business card, I mean leaders of a situation, whatever that might be, as leaders, we need to relieve the pressure, not add the pressure, in order to increase performance. And if you can do that, I absolutely guarantee you will see an exponential increase in the performance of your teams. And what's more, they will take ownership of their culture because it will be their decision to do so. And it is so much more effective, guys. So what I'm going to say to you is if we've struck a chord anywhere, you can find all of my details on there on the QR code. Tomorrow, with these guys, we're going to be having a bit of fun. So what saved me was effective medical training and understanding what I was doing and having the right kit and equipment. So we're pretty passionate about it. So I think at 11 o'clock, Simon, Mark, tomorrow, I think 11 o'clock tomorrow, Mike and I are going to run some live action demos here, and I'm going to blow your mind on the way first aid training is delivered and having the right equipment. So we're going to do that live here at 11. So if you're around tomorrow, come and see us, and we will change the way you think about training, right? That is a fact. But for today, I'm super happy. That's the kind of story. Appreciate it's the end of the day. I'm really happy. If anyone's got any questions, I know Simon's got a microphone here, and I think Laura's got one as well. Guys, if anyone's got any questions or would like to answer, then please feel free to shout, speak up, or forever hold your peace. What I would say to you, obviously, if you've enjoyed today's talk, please let these guys know. If you haven't, just remember that I'm a man that spent a lifetime acquiring a set of skills. And wherever you go, I will find you.
Has anybody got any questions?
Feel too scared now.
I've got one question, which is how did you get down from the Matterhorn?
Carefully. The trudge down is actually horrendous. It takes 6 hours to get back down because you've just got to make your way down. Weirdly, anyone done any climbs these sort of biggish mountains? Going down is actually more scary because when you go up, I'm looking at like that and it's kind of okay. When I'm coming down, I'm looking like that and it's kind of less okay. So actually coming down is weirdly more scary than going up. Yeah. I think so. I can fly a helicopter. Would have been easier.
Anyone else?
Not a question, but a sort of point on the miscommunication thing. About 30 years ago, I worked in Sussex, and we had 2 traffic cops who had a crash that was basically the fault of a bag of sweets. Right. Because it was when they were double crewed, they were driving around, and the passenger had bought some sweeties and was.
My mum always said sugar would kill me.
And was feeding them to the driver. And as they got to the bottom of the bag, they pulled up to a junction, and the driver said anything left. The passenger looked in the empty bag and said no, and the driver pulled out in front of the car that was approaching them from the left.
There you go, careless communication, a fatal lesson, literally. It is actually, guys, it's the root of everything. Actually, if you think about it, is effective communication. Whoever here has replied to a text message that you got wrong, and you get home and your other half goes, "Oh, that's not what I meant." How many of you, hand on heart moment, right? How many of you have had a row with your other half, at some point, maybe today, and whilst you were being chest poked and corrected as to how your performance could have been better next time, were you A, thinking to yourself, "That's a really good point. I'd never looked at it that way before. I hadn't realised that that was your perception. Okay, I'm going to look at this slightly differently." And how many of you were B, thinking, "The minute you so much as stop talking or draw breath, I am going to remind you that last Wednesday you didn't empty the dishwasher, and that has got nothing to do with what we're talking about now, but you were wrong, and I'm going to prove that you were wrong." And we're now off track. Who was A, who was B? B? Yeah, right, entire audience, right? At the point that you're doing that, you are not listening. So you are not communicating effectively. If you ever go into a negotiation, never speak more than 20% of the time. I'm a trained hostage negotiator, never speak more than 20% of the time. How many of us go into a negotiation with a preformed script? I'm going to tell them this, I'm going to give them the bullet points of my product, I'm going to do that. You are not communicating, you are sending. It's really interesting and so easy to fix.
All right, Tim.
Laura said she was going to sing.
On the session tomorrow is going to be a really interesting. Do you want to just give a brief summary?
Yeah, guys,
a
very brief summary for any of you who can make it tomorrow. Or genuinely aside, right? As you may have realised, both from operating in war zones and the like, essentially, Mike and I went to Ukraine and we taught 150 volunteers. And when I say volunteers, the week or 4 weeks before it, they were like bartenders, taxi drivers, bus drivers, etc. And they were now on the front line in Russia and Ukraine. We taught them life-saving first aid techniques. Of the 150, only 2 of them spoke English, and yet we managed to train them effectively. So how is it that in this country people can go away, look at a 3-day first aid at work course, looking at PowerPoint, and be no better at it, right? How long do you think you've got? How long do you think you've got? And I've got a dummy that will do this tomorrow for us. If you were to get a life-threatening bleed, right, which, anyone mountain bike? Oh, that happens all the time, yeah? Thing for the femoral artery. The front row at Glen Tress is reserved for ambulances. If you get a life-threatening bleed, how long do you think you've got to act? What do you reckon? 2 minutes. 2 minutes before you cannot save that person, give or take. How many ambulances in the UK do you think carry blood? None. None except a few of the air ambulances, right? None. How much pressure do you think you need to apply to stop an arterial bleed? 40 foot-pounds of pressure, and hold it, and it has to be put on within under 2 minutes, wherever you are, assuming you saw the injury happen at the time. When you get home today, when you get in your car, what I would like you to do is have a look at the little green box that is in your office or in the boot of your car. Open that little green box up, assuming you don't have to take everything out of the cellophane wrapper, which most of you probably do, and tell me what in there do you think you could use to apply and hold 40 foot-pounds of pressure. And if you don't, it is not fit for purpose, simple as that, in terms of life-saving. But that's the sort of thing we're going to get into tomorrow. We're going to do some real live action demos, and we're going to show you how that works for real. So if you're around tomorrow, come and see us at 11 o'clock.
It's 11:45.
Sorry, 11:45.
No, it's 11:45. If any of you are not around tomorrow morning, can't make that, Tim's going to be joining us at the Commercial Vehicle Show at the end of April as well. But if you're around 11:45 tomorrow,
Thanks,
promises to be.
Thank you very much for listening to me, guys. Really appreciate it.